From his beginnings as a humble plumber who fought through poverty, to becoming one of the most disliked villains in the UFC, here's the rise and fall of Conor McGregor, starting with how he rose through poverty to take the fighting game by storm. Conor's story resonated with so many fans because he came from truly humble, working-class beginnings. In fact, he used to have a plumbing gig while he trained to fight. Through perseverance and sheer determination, a young Conor was able to attain 2 Cage Warrior belts and was finally able to make his UFC debut in a fight against Marcus Brimage, a fight that he handily won within the first round, laying his opponent out in 1 minute and 7 seconds flat, earning him the knockout of the night and a $60,000 cash prize. Given that he was on welfare at the time, the amount was pretty huge for him, and the fight launched him into stardom, allowing him to get a fight with Max Holloway, who he beat via unanimous decision, a win which allowed him to take one of the most important steps in his career, his first fight in his home country, Ireland. Coming off of the Holloway fight, things took a turn for the worse for McGregor, who suffered an ACL injury due to the fight. This meant he couldn't fight for 10 whole months. But once the Irishman had healed, he had a golden opportunity presented to him, a UFC main event fight in his own home country. Throughout his career, Conor has worn his Irish pride on his sleeve, dedicating every win and every moment to his love for his Irish fans and homeland. So, to say this fight meant everything to him and his fans is a massive understatement. In the end, 9,500 Irish fans were packed into the stadium. Their hero delivered with grace, defeating Diego Brandao by TKO in just the first round. Then, of course, came his iconic words to his home crowd, declaring that the Irish had arrived in the UFC and that they were there to stay. The fighter is clearly an icon, so how did he get his iconic Mystic Mac nickname? Sometimes it's hard to explain to new UFC fans just how good Conor really was in his prime. To them, he's just an old dude who used to be like all the other legends. But prime Conor fans know he really was just built different. Let's take his first fight with Dustin Poirier, which took place at UFC 178. This was Conor's first fight after his multi-contract signing with the UFC, so all eyes were firmly on his performance. To his credit, the superstar looked supremely confident in the build-up to the fight. In fact, this was to mark the first time that Conor used his signature mind games, something he would soon become known for. Before the fight, Conor predicted a first-round knockout in his favor, a claim scoffed at by analysts everywhere. Poirier was, after all, no joke. Guess what ended up happening? In 1 minute and 46 seconds, Conor sealed the deal, knocking his opponent out with a left hook, and simultaneously earning himself a nickname, the soothsayer moniker, Mystic Mac. But Conor's star was just rising, and he had his eyes set on one goal, the lightweight championship belt, and so began his long road to take down Aldo. After dusting off Poirier, Conor had his eyes set on one Jose Aldo, the featherweight champ. To get there, he had to make himself a title contender first, something he accomplished by defeating Dennis Siver, who he handily beat in the second round, immediately proceeding to get in Aldo's face to challenge him. Aldo had to pull out of the fight, though, due to an injury, leaving McGregor to face Chad Mendes, who he finished off with a TKO in the second round, courtesy of a left hook. After the fight, he praised Mendes and thanked all his fans. He knew he finally had the opportunity to realize his dreams. He lived out those dreams in stunning fashion at UFC 194, beginning the fight with an immediate assault on Jose Aldo and knocking him out in just 13 seconds, setting a UFC championship record. Conor had now reached the pinnacle of his weight class, of the world even, but that wasn't enough for him. After all, there was always a second belt to wrap around his waist. Conor's career continued in its upwards trajectory after his first belt, but he decided to make a change and conquer a new weight division. Here, Conor began shopping around a little and eventually settled on a welterweight bout with Nate Diaz, who ended up handing him the first defeat of his career. However, McGregor was able to make a spectacular comeback, defeating Diaz by decision in their rematch. Now, Conor was ready to gun for the lightweight title, which was wrapped firmly around the waist of Eddie Alvarez. The lead-up to the fight had some of the most iconic moments in Conor's career, where he would verbally abuse Alvarez constantly, generating countless memes and viral clips. On the day of the fight itself, Conor was nothing less than his usual dominant self. Alvarez was simply unable to cope, getting knocked down multiple times in the first round. and eventually being floored by a combination in the second round. Conor had now conquered two separate spheres of the UFC world, and he made sure people knew it in his speech, displaying a degree of bragging and ego that, looking back, may have been a sign of things to come. Of course, before we get there, we need to talk about that money fight. By this point, Conor knew he was the king of the fighting world. He had won every accolade he possibly could, and was one of the most famous celebrities on the planet. So, what was next? Well, the man clearly decided it was time to start making some real money, leading him to challenge Floyd "Money" Mayweather to a boxing match, demand no less than $100 million. After ages of media teasing, the fight of the century between the king of the UFC world and the undefeated master of the boxing world was finally confirmed. The thing is, this is the start of when opinion on Conor began to shift. Fans were confused by the fight, seeing it as a gimmick. On top of that, Conor's trash talk didn't have the same flair. Now it was just weirdly mean-spirited, with many of his jokes coming off as crass awkward, or just plain falling flat. Sure, he made a ton of money off the match, but the cracks on his image had grown deeper, finally shattering his image during the Khabib fight. Khabib versus Conor. And all the controversy surrounding it will forever be the blackest spot in Conor's record, and the moment where even his die-hard fans started turning away from him. The build-up to the fight featured what Dana White calls the darkest moment in UFC history, when Conor assaulted Khabib's team van. Essentially, Conor was taking payback for an incident between one of his own teammates and Khabib Nurmagomedov. However, instead of handling everything in a normal way, the Irishman decided to absolutely lose it, attacking Khabib's van, throwing a chair into it and shattering one of the glasses. The fight was clearly going to happen by that point, and Conor did his image no more favors during the pre-game conferences. Even his most die-hard fans were annoyed by his obvious drunkenness and his disrespect to Khabib, whose father he insulted, even going so far as to offer a Muslim a glass of whiskey, something which became extremely controversial. Fans were also genuinely upset when Conor became extremely late to one press conference, culminating in a theme of disappointment that had begun ages ago. Khabib took care of McGregor pretty comfortably, submitting him and taking his lightweight belt for himself. This was pretty much the beginning of the end for Conor's reputation. Since then, he's been in constant controversy.
I'm probably going to start drinking it out of a bottle. If the bottle gets empty, I don't know what I'll do with this man and an empty bottle.
Spending more time advertising his whiskey than stepping foot into the ring. No one knows when Conor is slated to fight again. But one thing is for sure, the Conor of today isn't what he used to be. Well, folks, that was the rise and fall of Conor McGregor.